Hello, everyone, and welcome. I wanted to just share some thoughts this week that I've been having around um, the process of creating something new in our lives. Mm, For myself, at least, I know myself to be very much a creature of habit, and those habits are can be very stabilizing and grounding. For example, my um, morning practice is pretty consistent in that every morning I wake up as much as I can before my children to spend time in prayer and meditation and, just quietly either reflecting, journaling, reading scripture, it's really my time to center myself. So that's one habit that's a really good habit. But I've been thinking a lot about how we can, within our creative lives, establish a habit of conforming to our sort of existing circumstances. And it can be challenging when we both know that we're being called to something new and we desire something new for ourselves, but the framework for it hasn't yet to be created, or the life that we're living in particular doesn't isn't as expansive enough in order to hold maybe the larger vision of what we desire. And life doesn't really work the way that we think. The world is so instantaneous these days. You can instantly create an image or instantly order something and have it show up, at your door in a few days. But the true essence of creative process is actually quite slow and deliberate and over time. And if you look at plants, um, in particular, trees, they require a long, slow period of intentional resistance in order to grow. And that intentional resistance, you might seem to say, is like the environment working against them, that they are not going to be able to thrive. But actually, if put into all the right, perfect conditions, I heard someone say this earlier this week, the tree will not grow. It's with the absence of the wind creating force and necessary pressure, the tree doesn't have what it needs. And you can have all the sunshine and great fresh water and good soil, perfect conditions, but nothing comes of it. Eventually, the tree will wither and die because it doesn't have what it needs, which is resistance. And from an evolutionary perspective, um, this is how the soul works, right? We are in constant resistance and cooperation with the desire that we have to return to our source, to return to God. And I actually think that it's the resistance to God, it's the resistance to trusting our life, to trusting, having faith in the process. It's the resistance to our current conditions that fosters the highest degree of growth for the soul to actually truly become who it is meant to be, who it is created to be. And the same is true of the creative process, that when we might think, oh, if I have all the money that I need, and I have all the time that I need, and I know that I have all the skills that I need, I can go and do this thing that I'm feeling called to do, right? And wouldn't that be lovely, right? You know, especially for me as I'm like praying for people and things in my life, these unanswered prayers, they often bring my heart great grief, and I'm present to, you know, um, an aloneness that it's just been like so hard to face. Doing what I'm called to do every day and feeling so alone in it. And at the same time, I know that I have to persist. It's like, um, almost as though the aloneness that I'm experiencing is the wind that the tree requires. Um, and I almost hate to hear myself say that because I would love for it to be different. I would love to feel myself surrounded in the ways that I am calling for. And yet, that isn't what is, you know? And at the same time, the creative process that is alive in me, the um, the growth and the willingness to continuously face everything that I'm facing in order to become like the version of myself that I can feel being created by life, softer, more loving, you know. And I was thinking the other day, why don't people, why don't more people follow Jesus, or why don't more people like choose to really embrace uh, a path of devotion to God? And you know, I'm like, oh, because it it demands us to become something in the face of such great resistance. Like it's so convenient to be disconnected and full of consumption and you know, perpetually exhausted and just going through the motions of a life that's devoid of love and creativity and joy. It's actually, there's less resistance in our culture for people to remain in a state of conformity and consumption and self-destruction than there is for people to genuinely face their own ego, their own attachments, their own, grief, their deep emotions, their vulnerability, their tenderness, and share that with others, or um, meet that within themselves. And so we can more easily remain in our, you know, conditions and look at those conditions and be like, well, this isn't, like I don't have enough time, or I don't have enough money, or I don't have enough, you know, skills in order to stop what I'm doing and do something else. Or, you know, there's all these obstacles which are in the way of our creative self-expression that are seemingly normal obstacles. But, there's all these barriers to us having true and deep love and intimacy in our relationships. And they're seemingly normal barriers that of people's politeness and people pleasing and natural, social distance that we maintain culturally or personally because we weren't taught to push the edges, to meet that resistance within ourselves and to um, connect with one another. And it's been really interesting to me because I go to the gym nearly every day, 6 days a week, and I'm slowly developing relationships with these people who are there. men and women, and especially like the children, the that are part of the little kids club, because it's the one place that I can take my baby. And um I'm beginning to see the vulnerability, the fragility of people's lives. And these are people that I pray for every day. Most of them don't even know that I'm praying for them, and yet as slowly as we can be in proximity to people every single day and not even know the sadness, the struggles, the grief that they carry in their lives. We can, you know, and within ourselves, this is a similar conundrum because we can be operating through our lives in such a way where we're not in touch with our own feelings simply because the environment itself doesn't create space for those feelings to exist. And this is why I think people can go, years and then have big breakdowns because there's like an accumulation of all this emotional energy, which it had to go somewhere. And for me, this is a big part of why creativity matters. It is a place where I can bring my emotional expression. This is the root of our evolutionary journey comes through being able to access these deeper levels of emotion. And it's not as though they're not there in our mundane life. There are tears hiding behind the laundry and the dishes. Um, there are pains within our body which hold ancient anger that has yet to be expressed. There are ways in which our creature being um, doesn't know what it feels like to be loved in the ways that we've been praying for love for years. And these are things we are invited to be in touch with when we're accessing our own creative self-expression. And of course, when this is happening, maybe for the first time, um, all of those vulnerabilities will exist. The vulnerability, the risk of sharing, you know, sharing ourselves, sharing too much, the risk of being seen and or um, being rejected, the loss of love. And within a social structure where it's very easy for people to give you a like or not give you a like. It's like very easy for people to reject or adore you. Um, and there is a high degree of validation for things that are completely meaningless, and yet a high degree of ignorance around, um, or maybe it's not ignorance, but it's like ignoring that which is sacred and yet often deeply missed by most of us in and frankly, if we all recognize this, we would recognize the sacredness in ourselves and never be able to bring harm to anyone else. We would see each and every person on an evolutionary journey with us as a part of our healing journey and know that we can never be separate, our healing or theirs. And yet, there's such a culture of divisiveness in the world, especially today, even with just the whole likes, thumbs up or thumbs down thing, and we are going to have to rebel against that with some kind of radical form of self-love and a resistance towards social validation and a cultivation of our own resistance to create, our own resistance to say, I'm gonna do this thing even though I don't quite feel ready. I'm gonna take these steps even if nobody shows up. I'm gonna start to act on these ideas even if it doesn't form into what I imagined. And it's similar to the risk it takes to begin a new relationship, to begin extending yourself towards someone in love and connection, even at the risk of loss or rejection or incompatibility. But you do it anyways. Why? Because the soul desires to know itself as love, and it can only know itself as love through loving others, through extension of love and through the experience of love within oneself. And so I just wanted to share, some of these thoughts because I feel like we're going to be forming a new social culture in these next, you know, 20 years or so. One that will really shift our identity. And we can either become more of like a generic identity. It's interesting. I've been doing this walking with Jesus class, and I asked ChatGPT to create a image of Jesus that I could meditate on. And it's so funny, like the image looks like some guy that you might find on a dating app, with there's subtle ways in which his facial features are created to be appealing. And it doesn't, to me, at all feel like the Jesus that I might know or love. But more and more, we're seeing images being created that are designed to express a certain quality of consumption. That if we don't question that those images, they will likely become the way that we see the world. If we don't create our own, if we don't create our own things, our own words, our own ideas, if we don't test our own ideas within the field of relationship, of real relationship with people who we truly want to know and love, then we will never know what it's like to be truly known and loved. And there is nothing more that the human being craves than love and belonging. We think we might want power or resources but all of that is simply a replacement for essential love and belonging. We think we might want, other things, but really all of that is just something to replace the grief of not feeling love and belonging. And so with this, I just, I encourage us in our practice as we move through the week to push up against the wind that would say, we can just stay the same, and to push up against the parts of ourselves that fear the vulnerability of connection, to push up against the parts of ourselves that are wanting to um, avoid the work of creating new structures because the fear of rejection is too great. And to really begin to recognize in those social images a willingness to radically love ourselves into being who we are so that we can give what we're called to give, so that we can share what we're called to share, so that we can do what we're called to do in the world, regardless of the outcome, regardless of whether it brings us more likes or more followers, whether it results in receiving the love that we desire or receiving the life that we desire, right? Because those things in life, the answers to our prayers are not necessarily guaranteed, but the process itself that prayer and creativity takes us through, the process of becoming, the process of meeting the resistance and being shaken by the wind, being stirred inside by the call to love, is the very purpose of evolution. And whether it functions through our resistance to it or our cooperation with it, um, may we have the strength, the courage, the willingness, the fortitude, the support to do that. May we be so blessed in our lives to get our hands messy with paint or to come against the parts of us that are feeling unworthy and meet those emotions. Can we take the risk of hugging and staying in the hug a little bit too long so that the ache of our heart can be felt? And can we face our aloneness and meet it with a prayer to know the presence of love more deeply within ourselves and our lives? All right, my friends. That's all for now. Have a beautiful and blessed week. Uh, in the description to this video, you'll find a prayer request form that I've created. If there's something you want me to pray for you and with you, I would be so honored to be able to pray with you. And if you liked this video, give it a thumbs up. Give me some love. Share your heart in the comments. I love hearing from you so much. So much love. Bye for now.